The house on Maple Street. Impact. The funeral reception smelled of lilies and expensive catering. White tablecloths, silver trays, people in dark suits whispering condolences that evaporated before they reached the heart. Elena stood near the window of the country club ballroom, watching her sister Victoria work the room like it was a networking event. Even grief looked calculated on Victoria. Her black Chanel dress fitted perfectly, her makeup tastefully restrained, her handshake firm as she accepted sympathies from father's business associates. "Your father was a visionary," someone said. "A titan of industry," said another. Elena turned away, her own plain black dress suddenly feeling cheaper, her face bare of everything except exhaustion. She'd cried herself empty over the past 3 days. Victoria hadn't shed a tear. Not at the hospital, not at the funeral, not even when they'd closed the casket on the man who'd raised them both. Their father, Marcus Whitfield, had built Whitfield Manufacturing from nothing, a single machine shop that grew into an empire of precision engineering, government contracts, and steady profit. 50 years of 12-hour days, missed dinners, and relentless ambition. Elena had watched him become smaller in his final months, cancer eating away not just his body, but the force that had made him seem invincible. In the end, he'd been fragile, human, frightened. She'd been there for all of it, the hospital visits, the treatments, the 3 a.m. calls when he couldn't sleep and needed someone to talk to. Victoria had been too busy with her consulting firm, her important clients, her trajectory toward the success her father had always valued above everything else. "Elena," Victoria's voice cut through her thoughts. Her sister approached with 2 glasses of wine, offering one. "You look exhausted." "I am." "Well," Victoria sipped her wine, her eyes scanning the room. "At least it's over. He's at peace now." Elena wanted to throw her wine in Victoria's face. Instead, she drank it. "Mr. Pemberton wants to read the will tomorrow. 10 a.m. at his office. Don't be late." "I won't." "Good." Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "I know father's estate is complicated, but I'm sure he's divided things fairly. He always was meticulous about business matters." There it was. That tone. The subtle implication that Victoria understood their father in ways Elena never could. That Victoria, with her MBA and her corner office, spoke the same language of deals and assets and strategic planning. That Elena, who'd chosen teaching over corporate ambition, who'd stayed close to home instead of chasing prestige, was somehow less. "I'm sure he was fair," Elena said quietly. Victoria patted her shoulder. "Try to get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She glided away, already intercepting another cluster of mourners, her smile bright and professional. Elena finished her wine in silence and slipped out early, driving home through streets that felt emptier than they should. Truth. Pemberton and Associates occupied the top floor of the oldest building in downtown, all dark wood and leather chairs, and law books nobody read anymore. Elena arrived 15 minutes early and found Victoria already there, perfectly composed in a gray suit, scrolling through her phone. "You're here?" Victoria said, as if Elena's punctuality was somehow surprising. Douglas Pemberton emerged from his office, 70 years old, white hair, kind eyes that had seen every variation of family drama that money could produce. He'd been their father's attorney for 30 years. "Ladies, please come in." His office overlooked the town square. Elena took a chair across from his massive desk, while Victoria sat beside her, posture immaculate. Pemberton settled into his chair with a small sigh and opened a leather portfolio. "First, let me say again how sorry I am for your loss. Marcus was not only a client, but a friend. He spoke of both of you often." Victoria nodded graciously. Elena said nothing. "The will is straightforward," Pemberton continued, pulling out documents. "Your father was very specific about his wishes. Victoria,
To you, he bequeaths Whitfield Manufacturing in its entirety, all assets, properties, contracts, and associated business holdings. The company is yours to run as you see fit.
Victoria's face remained perfectly neutral, but Elena saw the flash of triumph in her eyes. Of course, Victoria got the crown jewel, the real inheritance, the thing that mattered. Elena, Pemberton's voice softened. To you, your father leaves the house on Maple Street. The words hung in the air like a sentence. The house on Maple Street, their childhood home, where they'd grown up, where father had lived alone for 20 years after mother died. A 3-bedroom colonial with a sagging porch and outdated kitchen worth maybe $300,000 in a generous market. Victoria inherited a company worth $40 million. Elena got a house that needed a new roof. That's it. The question escaped before Elena could stop it. That's what the will specifies, Pemberton said gently. The house and all its contents are yours, Elena. Fully paid off, no liens, no conditions. It's yours, free and clear. Victoria made a sound. Not quite a laugh, but close. Well, I suppose that's settled then. Elena's throat tightened. She'd known, somewhere deep down, she'd known that father valued Victoria's path more than hers. Victoria was the success story, the daughter who'd followed in his footsteps, who understood the importance of building and acquiring and winning. Elena was just the teacher who'd never shown proper ambition, who'd cared more about books than balance sheets. But she hadn't expected it to be this stark, this cruel. There is one other thing, Pemberton said, but Victoria was already standing. Thank you, Mr. Pemberton. I'll need to schedule a meeting to discuss the business transfer, tax implications, board notifications, all of that. Can your secretary arrange something for later this week? Of course, but Victoria, please sit down for a moment. I really can't. I have calls scheduled. Victoria was already moving toward the door. She paused just long enough to look at Elena, her expression something between pity and satisfaction. The house is nice, Elena, really. I know it's not much, but at least you'll have a place to live. That's something. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Elena sat frozen, humiliation burning through her chest. Not much. At least you'll have a place to live. The words echoed like slaps. Elena, Pemberton's voice was careful. Your sister left before I could explain something important. She barely heard him. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of this kind old man who just delivered the evidence of her father's final judgment. Second-rate daughter gets second-rate inheritance. It seems unfair, Pemberton continued. But your father asked me to give you something else. He left instructions that you were to receive this after the will was read, but only if Victoria wasn't present. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. Elena's name was written on the front in her father's angular handwriting. He said you'd understand when the time was right, Pemberton said. He also said to tell you that he was proud of you, that you were more like him than Victoria ever was, because you understood that some things matter more than profit. Elena took the envelope with shaking hands. It was heavier than she expected, the paper expensive. The house on Maple Street, Pemberton said slowly, contained something your father valued more than the business. He told me that explicitly. He said the house was the true inheritance, but that Victoria would never see it that way. Her blindness, he said, was proof she'd never learned what really mattered. I don't understand, neither do I. Not completely. But Marcus was very specific. You were to inherit the house, Victoria was to inherit the business. And when the right moment came, you'd find what he left for you. Pemberton leaned forward. He also said that if Victoria ever mocked you for receiving just a house, I was to inform her that she'd lost something far more valuable than money. Elena clutched the envelope to her chest. What does that mean? I think your father left you something to discover. Something he trusted only you to find and understand. Pemberton smiled sadly. Go to the house, Elena. See what he wanted you to see.
She left the office in a daze, the envelope burning like a coal in her hands. Recognition. The house on Maple Street stood exactly as it had for 40 years. White paint peeling near the gutters, oak tree shading the front yard. Flower beds that mother had planted, now wild with neglect. Elena sat in her car for 10 minutes, staring at the place where she'd grown up, where father had lived alone after they'd both moved out, where he died surrounded by machines that beeped his final heartbeats. The key was in her purse. She'd had it for years. Father had insisted both daughters keep keys, though Victoria had probably thrown hers away. Elena walked up the familiar path, unlocked the door, and stepped into silence. The house smelled like him. Old Spice and coffee, and the particular mustiness of a home lived in by someone too tired to open windows. The furniture was the same. Mother's couch, father's recliner, the dining table where they'd eaten 1,000 meals. Photographs lined the walls. Elena and Victoria as children, mother before the cancer took her, father young and hopeful before ambition hardened him into something sharp. Elena wandered from room to room, the envelope still clutched in her hand. The kitchen was dated but clean. The bedrooms were sparse. Father's study was exactly as he'd left it. Desk covered in papers, bookshelves sagging under the weight of engineering manuals and business texts. The smell of his pipe tobacco still faint in the air. She sat at his desk and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, 4 pages in father's cramped script, and a small brass key. My dear Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Victoria has already dismissed you as the lesser daughter who received the lesser inheritance. I know my Victoria. I built her, after all, shaped her into exactly what I feared I might become. Successful, ambitious, blind to anything that can't be quantified on a balance sheet. You're different. You always were. When you chose teaching over business school, I was disappointed. I won't pretend otherwise. But over these last years, as I've gotten sicker and had time to think about what I actually built versus what I thought I was building, I've realized something. You're the only one who understood what mattered. The business is successful. I'm proud of what I created. But it's just a business. Machines and contracts and money. It will outlast me, but it won't remember me. Not really. It doesn't love anyone, and no one truly loves it. Victoria loves what it represents, but she doesn't love the thing itself. She loves winning, not creating. You sat with me in the hospital. You held my hand when I was afraid. You asked me about my life, not my accomplishments, but my memories, my regrets, the small moments I'd overlooked while chasing something bigger. You're the one who reminded me that I had a life beyond the business. So I'm giving Victoria exactly what she wants, Whitfield manufacturing and everything that comes with it. Let her have the empire. Let her have the success. She'll be thrilled, at least until she realizes what she doesn't have. You get this house. I know it seems like nothing compared to a $40 million company. Victoria will certainly think so. But this house contains something worth more than any business could ever be. In my study, behind the bookshelf on the east wall, there is a door. The key is with this letter. Inside, you'll find what I truly built. The thing I poured my real heart into, not my ambition. It's yours now, all of it. What you do with it is up to you. But here's what Victoria doesn't know and what you must understand. The business is successful now, but it's built on a foundation that's crumbling. I've known for 2 years. Bad contracts, liability issues, technological obsolescence. I bought us time, but the problems are fundamental. Within 5 years, Whitfield Manufacturing will be worth a fraction of its current value. Maybe nothing at all. I couldn't fix it. I was too tired, too sick, too old. I could have warned Victoria, but she never asked about the business's health. She just assumed success was permanent. She'll inherit a glittering prize that will tarnish in her hands. She'll learn, eventually, that legacy means nothing if it's built on ambition alone. You, my dear Elena, inherit the thing I should have valued all along. Take care of it. Share it if you want, or keep it private. But know that you are receiving the only thing I created that will actually last. I'm proud of you. I should have said it more often. I should have shown it better. But I was too busy proving something to myself. And by the time I understood what I'd lost, it was too late for everything except this final gesture. Your father, Marcus. Elena read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she stood, walked to the east wall of the study, and began pulling books from the shelf. Behind the leather-bound engineering texts was a door, narrow, painted the same color as the wall, nearly invisible. She fitted the brass key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open. A stairway descended into darkness. Elena found a light switch and clicked it. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life, illuminating a basement she'd never known existed. She descended slowly, her heart hammering. The basement was huge, stretching the full length of the house, professionally finished, climate-controlled. But it wasn't the space that made her gasp. It was what filled it. Paintings. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. They covered every wall, were stacked on tables, leaned against easels. Oil paintings, watercolors, sketches, mixed media pieces. Landscapes and portraits, and abstract explosions of color. Some were clearly amateurish, early attempts, learning strokes. Others were breathtaking in their skill and emotion. All of them were signed in the bottom corner, M. Whitfield, her father's secret life, hidden beneath the house he'd left her. Elena moved through the space in a trance, examining each piece. Here was a portrait of Mother, young and laughing, painted with such tenderness it made Elena's chest ache. Here was a landscape of the mountains where they'd vacationed once, when Elena was 6. Here was an abstract piece that seemed to capture rage and sorrow and defiant hope all at once. On a desk in the corner, she found journals, decades of them, filled with her father's thoughts on color and technique, sketches and studies, philosophical ramblings about art and meaning. The entries began when he was 22, right before he'd started the business. They continued sporadically through the years, growing more infrequent as the company demanded more of his time, then picking up again in the final 2 years as illness freed him from the office. I sacrificed this for success, one entry read. I told myself I'd return to it later, when I had time, when I'd proven myself. But there's never time. There's only the endless march of profit and expansion and winning. I've built something impressive and hollow. These paintings are the only things I've made that actually contain my soul. Elena sank into a chair surrounded by her father's secret heart. This was his legacy, not Whitfield manufacturing with its government contracts and precision machining, but this hidden gallery of color and emotion and vulnerable humanity. A man who'd spent 50 years being hard and calculating and successful, who'd hidden the softest part of himself in a locked basement because the world didn't value beauty the way it valued profit, and he'd given it to her. Not to Victoria, who'd inherited the brittle shell of his ambition, but to Elena, who'd sat with him when he was dying and asked him about the things he'd loved. She sat there for an hour, maybe 2, crying and laughing and feeling more connected to her father than she'd ever felt when he was alive. He'd understood her. He trusted her. He'd known that she was the only one who'd treasure this more than money. Finally, she climbed back upstairs and called Pemberton. I found it, she said when he answered. I thought you might. Your father showed me, years ago. Made me promise to keep the secret until you inherited the house. He said you'd know what it meant. It's incredible. There must be 200 paintings down there. At least. Your father was prolific, especially toward the end. Elena, there's something else you should know. I had several pieces appraised years ago at your father's request. He wanted to understand their value, though he swore he'd never sell them. Some of the later work, the pieces he did in the last 5 years, they're extraordinary, museum quality. If you decided to sell even a fraction of them, you'd be looking at several $1,000,000. If you wanted to donate them and establish a foundation in his name, you could create something truly significant. Elena closed her eyes. And the business? What he said in the letter about problems? Pemberton sighed. It's all true. Marcus confided in me about the structural issues. He'd overextended on contracts that aren't going to renew, and there are some liability concerns that will likely surface within the year. The company will survive, but it won't be the empire Victoria thinks she's inheriting. She'll spend years trying to salvage something that's fundamentally compromised. She doesn't know? Your father never told her. He said she wouldn't listen, that she was too certain of her own understanding of success. He hoped she'd learn something from the struggle, but he wasn't optimistic. Pemberton paused. Elena, your father left you the true inheritance. Victoria got the consolation prize, though she'll never see it that way until it's too late. After they hung up, Elena walked through the house again, seeing it differently now. Not a dated old home worth less than a luxury car, but a treasure box containing her father's soul. Every room held memories, but beneath it all was the secret gallery, the proof that Marcus Whitfield had been more than a businessman, that he'd been an artist, a dreamer, someone who'd understood beauty even as he'd chased profit.
Victoria would never understand. Victoria was already planning how to expand the business, how to leverage it into even greater success, how to prove herself the worthy inheritor of father's ambition. Victoria had no idea she'd inherited a sinking ship. Conclusion. 6 months later, Elena stood in the Whitfield Art Gallery, formerly the house on Maple Street, now transformed into a private gallery and artist residency program funded by the sale of 20 of father's paintings. The remaining works would never be sold, but those 20 had brought in enough money to renovate the house, establish an endowment, and create a foundation supporting young artists who couldn't afford traditional paths to success. The opening exhibition featured Marcus Whitfield's work alongside pieces by the foundation's first 5 resident artists. The local paper had written about the unknown master who'd spent 50 years hiding his genius while building a business empire. Art critics from the State University had declared him significant, a voice from an era that valued profit over passion, whose work stood as testament to the cost of ambition. Elena moved through the rooms, greeting visitors, accepting condolences and congratulations. The house was alive again, filled with people who understood that some things couldn't be quantified on balance sheets. Victoria hadn't come to the opening. She was too busy trying to save Whitfield manufacturing. The problems had surfaced exactly as father predicted. First, a lawsuit over a faulty contract, then revelations about technological obsolescence, then the slow bleeding of clients to competitors who'd innovated while Whitfield stagnated. Victoria was fighting hard, sacrificing everything to preserve what father had built. Elena almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because 3 months after the will reading, Victoria had called Elena, her voice sharp with poorly concealed panic. I need to see father's papers, the ones from his study. There might be documents that could help with the business transition. The study's been cleared out, Elena had said. Everything relevant to the business was already in the corporate files. There must be something else. Notes, correspondence, anything. Elena, I know you think the house was some kind of prize, but it's just a house. The business is what matters. If there's anything in that house that could help me save it, I need to know. Elena had walked down to the basement gallery while Victoria talked, surrounded by father's secret heart. There's nothing here that would help you, Victoria. Father left you exactly what he meant to leave you. Don't be petty. This is bigger than your hurt feelings about the inheritance. If Whitfield manufacturing fails, hundreds of people lose their jobs. The family name means nothing compared to what father actually cared about. He left you the business. He left me something else. I'm sorry you're struggling, but that's not my responsibility. Victoria had hung up without saying goodbye. They hadn't spoken since.
Elena heard updates through the small-town grapevine. Victoria had taken out loans, sold assets, worked 18-hour days trying to stabilize the company. Maybe she'd succeed. Maybe she'd learn something from the struggle. Maybe she'd eventually understand that Father's final lesson had been about value, what truly matters versus what merely glitters. Or maybe she'd simply remain bitter, convinced she'd been cheated by a father who'd never understood business as well as she did. Elena didn't know and didn't particularly care. She had work to do, artists to support, her father's legacy to honor, a gallery to run. She'd quit teaching to focus on the foundation full-time and discovered she loved it more than anything she'd done before. This was meaningful. This was lasting. This was what Father had wanted her to have. As the evening wound down and the last visitors left, Elena stood in the basement gallery, surrounded by her father's paintings. A portrait of Mother smiled at her from the east wall. A landscape of mountains glowed in warm evening light. An abstract piece pulsed with color and life and defiant hope. "I understand now," she whispered to the empty room. "I understand what you were trying to tell me.
That success is hollow if it costs your soul. That ambition can blind you to beauty. That the things we hide from the world are often the things most worth revealing. That Victoria had inherited $40 million worth of machinery and contracts and slow decay, while Elena had inherited something priceless. Proof that their father had been fully human, capable of creation that mattered, worthy of memory that transcended profit. The house on Maple Street was worth more than any business could ever be. Elena turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, locking the hidden door behind her. Tomorrow, she'd meet with the resident artists, review applications for the next cycle, plan the foundation's first scholarship program. Night, she'd sleep in the house her father left her, surrounded by the legacy he'd trusted only her to understand. And somewhere across town, Victoria would work late into the night, fighting to save a company their father had known was already lost, never understanding that she'd been given the consolation prize. Some lessons arrive too late for forgiveness. Some truths can only be seen in hindsight. And some inheritances are measured not in dollars, but in understanding. The quiet recognition that what we treasure reveals who we truly are. Elena had received her father's soul. Victoria had received his ambition's hollow shell. In the end, it wasn't even close. 18 months later, the call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Elena was helping a young sculptor install her piece in the gallery's second-floor space. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice wasn't. "Elena." "It's Victoria." Elena steadied herself against the doorframe. "Victoria? I need to see you. Can you meet me somewhere? Not the house. Somewhere neutral." There was something in her sister's voice, something stripped of the polished confidence, the calculated control. She sounded tired, human. The coffee shop on 3rd Street, 1 hour. Victoria was already there when Elena arrived, sitting in a back corner booth, her expensive suit somehow looking diminished on her frame. She'd lost weight. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Elena slid into the opposite seat. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I'm selling the business. What's left of it. A conglomerate out of Chicago is buying the assets, assuming the debts. I'll walk away with about $2 million after everything settles. From a company worth $40 million 18 months ago." Elena said nothing. "You knew, didn't you? Or suspected? That Father left me something poisoned?" "I knew what Father told me, that the business had problems he couldn't fix, that you'd inherit exactly what you valued most and learn exactly what it cost." Victoria laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Mission accomplished then. I've spent every waking hour for 18 months trying to save something that was already dying. I've lost friends, relationships, sleep, my health. And for what? To preserve a legacy that Father apparently didn't even believe in anymore?" She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was an article from a national art magazine.
The Secret Life of Marcus Whitfield, Industrialist's Hidden Artistic Genius. Below it was a photograph of the gallery and another of Elena standing beside one of Father's masterworks. I've been reading about you, about the foundation, the residency program, the scholarship fund. The art world loves the story. Successful businessman who secretly painted masterpieces while building an empire. They're calling him important, significant, a voice of his generation. She took the phone back, staring at the screen. I spent my whole life trying to be him, and I never knew who he actually was. Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. He loved the business once. He was proud of what he built. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about creation and became about winning. He told me that himself in the letter he left. He said he'd sacrificed his soul for success, and by the time he realized what he'd lost, it was too late to get it back. So he decided to teach me the same lesson by letting me inherit his mistakes. No, Elena leaned forward. He gave you what you wanted, Victoria. You wanted the business. You wanted to be the successful daughter, the one who understood profit and strategy and ambition. You got all of that. What you learned from it, that was up to you. Victoria was quiet for a long time, staring into her untouched coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was cruel to you at the lawyer's office. I looked at you like you were pathetic for inheriting just a house. I felt superior, victorious. I thought Father had finally made it clear which daughter mattered. I know. I've spent 18 months being humiliated, watching everything crumble, having people who used to respect me avoid my calls, fighting battles I couldn't win because the foundation was rotted through. She looked up, and Elena saw tears in her sister's eyes, for the first time since childhood. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, I still didn't learn. I still thought it was about the business, about saving it, about proving I could fix what Father couldn't. I was still trying to win, even when winning was impossible. What changed? I went to your gallery last week. You weren't there. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. But really, she swallowed hard. I needed to understand what Father gave you that he didn't give me. Elena waited. I stood in that basement for 2 hours, looking at his paintings, really looking at them. And I saw him, Elena. Not the hard businessman who taught me that success was everything. Not the distant father who was always disappointed I wasn't working harder, climbing higher, winning bigger. I saw the person underneath all of that. The person who felt things deeply, who saw beauty, who created something that actually mattered. I never knew that person. He never showed me. Or maybe he tried and I was too busy trying to impress him to notice. He showed you what you were ready to see, just like he showed me. But he gave you the truth, Elena. He gave you his heart. He left me with nothing but a test I was designed to fail. The tears spilled over now, running down Victoria's carefully composed face. How do I forgive that? How do I forgive him for letting me believe success was everything, and then proving it was worth nothing? How do I forgive myself for being exactly what he made me, and exactly what he apparently despised? Elena reached across the table and took her sister's hand. Victoria flinched, but didn't pull away. He didn't despise you. He saw himself in you. The version of himself he regretted becoming. He gave you the business because that's what you wanted, what you'd worked toward your whole life. But he hoped you'd learn what he learned, that building something for its own sake is empty if there's no soul in it. I lost everything learning that lesson. No, you lost the business. That's not everything. That's what Father wanted you to understand. Victoria pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes with a napkin. I don't know who I am without it, without the ambition, the drive, the constant push toward more. I've defined myself by success for so long that failure feels like death. Then maybe you get to discover who you actually are. Not who Father taught you to be, not who the business made you, just you. Victoria without all the armor. They sat in silence. Two sisters who'd spent their whole lives in different worlds, finally occupying the same space, the gallery, the foundation. You're doing something real there, something that lasts. I read about the artists you're supporting, kids who couldn't afford art school, who wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. You're creating opportunities the way Father created machines. But yours actually changed lives. It's what he wanted, what he trusted me to build. I was wrong. At the lawyer's office. You didn't inherit nothing. You inherited everything that mattered. And I was too blind to see it. Victoria stood, gathering her coat. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve to be here, taking up your time. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Father didn't love you less. He loved you enough to trust you with his truth. Elena stood as well. What will you do now? I don't know. Sleep for a month. Figure out who I am when I'm not fighting. Maybe, she hesitated, maybe learn to see the world the way Father did in that basement. The way you do. Not as something to conquer, but as something to appreciate. The gallery needs a development director, Elena said quietly. Someone who understands business, fundraising, strategic growth, someone who could help us expand the residency program, reach more artists, make Father's legacy bigger than just one gallery in a small town. Victoria stared at her. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're brilliant at business, Victoria. You always have been. You just applied it to something Father had already broken. But this is something healthy, something growing. We could use someone with your skills. And maybe working with artists instead of machines might teach you something about creation instead of consumption. After everything I said to you, after how I treated you, Father gave us both exactly what we needed to become who we were meant to be. I got his heart, you got his lesson. Maybe it's time we combine them into something neither of us could build alone. Victoria's tears came again, but different this time. Not bitter, not broken, but something closer to relief. I'd have to start over, learn a completely different way of thinking. Yes, I'd be working for you, the little sister I dismissed as the failure. Yes, I'd have to admit I was wrong about everything. Yes. Victoria laughed through her tears, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine. When do I start? They left the coffee shop together, stepping out into autumn sunlight that turned the ordinary street golden. 18 months ago, they'd sat in a lawyer's office while their lives diverged, one toward apparent triumph, one toward apparent loss. Now they walked side by side toward the gallery, toward Father's hidden legacy, toward a future neither had imagined. The house on Maple Street stood waiting, full of paintings and possibility, and the truth Marcus Whitfield had spent 50 years learning, that real inheritance isn't measured in dollars or businesses or conventional success. It's measured in understanding, in beauty, in the courage to show your soul to the people you love. Victoria had finally learned what Elena had always known, that their father's greatest creation wasn't the company that bore his name, but the art he'd hidden in the basement, and the daughters he trusted to understand the difference between what glitters and what actually shines. Some lessons cost everything to learn, but the learning itself is priceless. And sometimes justice arrives not as revenge, but as the slow, painful, necessary process of becoming who you were always meant to be.